Hey everyone, welcome back to the Listening Vault Inside Kyle. I'm Koushik Gaja, and if you caught the trailer, you know we're all about those quiet spaces between impulse and action. Thanks for the feedback on episode 0. Glad it's resonating. Today, in episode 1, we're unpacking the core questions that set the stage for everything in pause. We'll break it down into 4 parts, starting with the questions themselves, then how to approach them, my personal backstory, and the bigger picture. Along the way, we'll weave in ties to The World Just Is for that story angle. Let's dive in. Okay, let's kick off with the heart of what draws people into pause, those everyday puzzles that make you pause mid step from the About This Book section. Have you ever noticed how quickly you react before you've had time to think? Like someone cuts you off in conversation and snap, your response is out there, sharper than you meant. I remember once in a meeting, I blurted out a defensive comment before even registering why it bugged me. Turns out it hit an old insecurity from my startup days. Why certain patterns repeat even when you know better. Think about that one habit you keep circling back to despite all the resolutions. For me, it's procrastination on creative work. I know it's from fear of failure, but it loops anyway. Why some decisions feel deliberate while others feel automatic. One feels like you're in the driver's seat, the other like the car just took off, like choosing a career path versus grabbing coffee without thinking. Why effort doesn't always lead to change, and insight doesn't always lead to control. You get the light bulb moment, but nothing shifts. Frustrating, right? I've had therapy insights that felt game changing, but weeks later, old reactions creep back. At what point does a thought become an action? Where does an impulse actually come from? And if so much of our behavior seems to arrive before we are aware of it, what does it really mean to choose? Pause does not tell you what to believe. It begins with a quieter inquiry, what unfolds between impulse and action. Drawing from psychology, neuroscience, and lived experience, this book explores how emotion, habit, memory, and unconscious preparation shape behavior long before intention appears, and why awareness often arrives after a direction is already forming. This book does not argue against agency, it examines where participation becomes possible and how presence can alter what would otherwise move unchecked. These aren't just rhetorical, they're invitations to notice your own life. Ever had a day where everything felt on autopilot? That's the gap we're probing here. And hey, if this reminds you of Kael in The World Just Is, it's no coincidence. His beat to late world is all about feeling those impacts firsthand. But before we go deeper, let's talk about how to even approach these questions without rushing. This is straight from the author's note in pause, but I'll weave in some thoughts on why it matters, because jumping to answers too fast is exactly what we're trying to notice. The book isn't written to persuade you, instruct you, or make you feel all reassured. It's more like a trail to follow, one step at a time. A lot of this stuff happens below the surface. Emotional momentum building up, habits kicking in, the way our brains frame things without us knowing, and all that unconscious prep work. So, when I was writing, I realized the best way is to take it slow, not searching for big aha conclusions right away. Instead, let the ideas bump up against your own life. For example, I tried forcing change once with a strict routine app during a busy startup phase, tracked every minute, but it fell apart because I wasn't noticing the underlying fatigue driving my slip ups. Slowing down helped me see that. The words here, like choice, agency, awareness, and responsibility, they're not locked in definitions or some philosophical stance. They build as we go. Early on, it's about how responses sneak in before you reflect. Later, it's where you can actually join in once you spot it. This isn't a step by step guide with techniques or guarantees of mastery. No, do this and control everything. It's not super academic either. Yeah, psychology and neuroscience show up when they fit, but the heart is practical. How does action really unfold in your moments? In my experience, reading stuff like this during quiet mornings helped not to fix me, but to recognize patterns in real time, like catching a knee jerk email reply before hitting send, And if it stirs up discomfort, uncertainty, or even resistance, that's okay. Actually, it's often a sign that your usual ways of seeing action and responsibility are getting a little nudge. Happened to me too. I resisted the idea that, not everything's under conscious control at first, but sitting with it shifted things. If there's one gentle nudge for approaching this, it's don't rush to decide what it all means. Stay with what's described long enough to recognize it in your day to day. That's where the quiet power is. Yeah, easier said than done, right? But that's where my own story comes in. Let's get into the preface from Pause, where I share how this whole inquiry started for me. It's not some grand origin tale, it's just honest reflections from my life that led to the book. For a long time, I moved through my days assuming I was deciding as I went. I'd speak up in meetings, react to feedback, agree to projects, pull back when overwhelmed, commit to goals, or switch directions, all with this quiet confidence that these were my choices. They felt so immediate, natural, and justified. I didn't really question where they came from, I just dealt with the aftermath. Looking back, that was during my early tech startup days where everything was fast paced, and I thought being quick was a strength. But over time, something subtle started nagging at me. I began noticing how often my reactions showed up before my thoughts caught up, like how familiar situations, say a heated team debate, would pull out the same defensive responses, even though I'd told myself I'd grown past them, or how insights from books or talks didn't stick. I'd have a plan, but actions wouldn't follow. For instance, I once read about mindful communication and got excited, but in the next argument with a co founder, old habits took over, sharp words first, regret later. The question that stuck with me wasn't some big dramatic thing. It was simple and kept coming back. Why does this keep happening? It wasn't about blame, it was curiosity. That question didn't hit me with instant answers. Instead, it led to just observing, slowing down those split second moments that usually flew by, paying attention not just to what I did, but how the responses built up before I could even name them. I started journaling these, like noting after a stressful day how fatigue turned small irritations into full reactions. It was uncomfortable at first, but eye opening. This book grew right out of that kind of attention. It's not a bunch of conclusions I cooked up. It's a record of noticing, watching how reactions put themselves together, seeing how often an action was already tilting one way by the time I felt like I was involved. Nothing in here started as theory for me. It came from real, repeated experiences, the uncomfortable ones, the ordinary, everyday stuff, like realizing during a quiet walk that my decisions to avoid risks were echoes from past failures, not fresh choices. If there's anything I hope the book offers, it's not certainty or quick fixes or even reassurance. It's that spark of recognition, the kind where something you felt deep down but never quite named suddenly clicks into view. For me, that happened when I saw how much of my life was on auto, and it freed up space to respond differently, even if just a little. This isn't about inviting you to fix yourself. It's just an invitation to pause, to see what's really moving under the surface. And that pause, it opens up the bigger picture we're building toward. Let's wrap this episode with the introduction from Pause, where we zoom out on how all this fits together. Most of us cruise through life thinking we're the bosses of our decisions, standing right in the middle, weighing options, considering fallout, and picking our moves with full conscious power. It's this nice story of autonomy and control we tell ourselves. But if we slow down and really watch our inner workings, that story starts to crack a bit. We see how we jump at discomfort, slip into old patterns, or let emotions steer before logic even shows up. We justify stuff after it's done, and some choices feel more like reflexes. The truth hits closer to home but more accurately. A lot of what feels like deciding is really momentum from childhood stuff, emotional habits, unexamined beliefs. We inherit these pulls without realizing, follow impulses blindly, and stick to the familiar, only claiming it as intentional later. For me, this clicked during a failed product launch in my startup. I thought I was strategically pivoting. But looking back, it was fear driven momentum from past setbacks, not clear headed choice. Observing that changed how I approach decisions now. This book kicks off at that edge where actions don't start where we assume. It's not about ditching responsibility, it's about pinning it down right. If unseen forces shape our moves, getting to know them is step one to actually joining in. We'll dig into that inner setup, emotional circuits prepping reactions, cognitive patterns filtering what we see, unconscious bits molding responses before intention fully kicks in. These aren't bugs, they're the mind's base layer, but understanding them lets us build on or shift them. Recognizing we don't have total conscious reign isn't giving up, it's getting precise. Responsiveness means seeing the influences, so reaction isn't the default. The clearer we get on what's moving us, the better we can participate in our actions. This isn't knocking hope or possibilities, it's shining a light on the mechanisms so we can step out of auto repeat and into something more deliberate. The book makes a careful point. Agency isn't at the impulse's start, but in staying present as it builds. What we call choosing is usually jumping into existing momentum from inheritance, emotions, cognition, habits, not starting from scratch. What follows isn't mastery tips or downers, it's looking at where we can influence once we see the autopilot clearly. By the end, you'll spot how emotional and cognitive momentum sets up actions pre awareness. Tell apart impulse, interpretation, and doing as separate beats. See habits lock in below the radar. Find that slim window for participation, even with limits. Rethink responsibility as shaping patterns over time, not commanding every impulse. Scope wise, this isn't solving every debate on agency or morals. It's practical. How does action play out in real life and where can we hop in? Science here highlights unconscious prep and emotional push shaping what's available to us, not erasing planning or reflection, but asking what's already set up for those to work. Philosophical takes on rational control, not dismissed, but set aside for the prior question. What needs to be in place inside for any agency to happen? And to tie it to the fiction side, this bigger view is what Kyle embodies in The World Just Is, his automatic shell from delays, the momentum of mimicry, but those sparks where presence breaks through. It's the inquiry in story form, showing how noticing shifts the unchecked. In my life, applying this meant pausing during high stress pitches, seeing the fear momentum, then choosing presence over reaction, which landed better outcomes. If you're feeling that pull to notice more, grab Pause or The World Just Is on Amazon or InsideKael.framer.website. Drop your takeaways on at InsideKael Instagram. What question are you sitting with? Might spark episode 2, where we explore impulse origins. Thanks for listening. Until next time, unlock that vault and take a breath.